SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Today we are going to have a class on women novelists of Romantic age. As you're all aware of the Romantic age, the features of the Romantic age, but as far as we are concerned, we have seen that a lot of male domination in literature has been noticed for a long time. This particular phase shows a change from the routine. Before we proceed discussing about the novelists of the Romantic age, I would like to focus on the features of the Romantic fiction, because there are certain special, unique aspects of the fiction written during this period which has to be taken into consideration before we understand the female writers, the women writers of this period. As you can see on the monitor, that there are various forms of novels which were written prior to the women writers who started writing. The various kinds of novels that were written are the epistolary. Now, epistolary type of novel rather means the kind of letters, through letter writing. Through letters, these kinds of novels have been written. You find romance is in the air, and then there is this didactic kind of novels which focuses on moral preachings, moral teachings. You have Gothic novels. We will discuss at length on each of these fiction and the women novelists who have contributed to this. We've also seen that Walter Scott, through his historical works, historical fiction, had popularized this particular kind of novel. During the Romantic age, you will find that there's a kind, it's also known as the age of sensibility. You will also find novels such as the philosophical novels, or which we call as the novels of ideas, which were quite popular during that period. That is the 18th century. When we are talking about the Romantic age, we are actually talking about the Romantic period. You will find that evangelical and moral tales were also being written by these women writers. Gothic tradition, which explores the darker aspects of human nature, were also imitated by these women novelists. Later came some historical fiction and then romances. You will find local fiction, regional novels, especially from Ireland. The writers, Irish writers and the Scottish writers who came, they started providing glimpses into this culture and the history of Scotland and Ireland, and these things could be observed in the writings of that period. There are other things which we need to understand, that prior to these 18th century, we didn't have fiction writers, nor did we have women writers who had initiated. It all started with Richardson's Pamela and Henry Fielding and Tobias Smollett. These were all the writers who made novel as a popular form in literature. But there are few things which brought about this change. For example, the education of women and the nature of the age plays a very important role when it comes to women writing. These writers were intensely emotional. They being women, the nature of the age also helped them to contribute to this kind of writing. The influence of the French Revolution. We all know that between 1789 and 1799, the French Revolution took place, and the influence of the French Revolution spread worldwide, and it also left its effect on the literature, English literature of that period. The spirit of the emotional age actually inspired these women writers to start writing. There's a very important publication which took place in 1792 by Mary Wollstonecraft. The book, the treatise which she wrote, was Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which is a very inspirational feminist tract. Now, this particular volume or this particular work rather focused on how women need to be educated. The need, it was urgently needed to educate these women, and maybe the after effects of this work could be seen because a lot of women actually came on the forefront. You will also find that she herself wrote a novel which was published in 1798, The Wrongs of Woman. What did she do in this work? Wollstonecraft, she attempted to show women of all classes, especially they were oppressed because of the English patriarchal system. And this is what she tried to portray through this novel of hers. In this particular novel, you will find that the protagonist, Maria, and her emotions were hounded by the social structures, particularly the law, the legal system, which actually brought about this change. And then you can find that after all these features that were evident during this 18th century had a clear-cut impact on the women writers. There was a surge of women writers who came forward during this period. Therefore, this particular period is quite well known for the contribution that the women made in this field. We can see that the writers include Sarah Fielding, she was born in 1710 and she died in 1768. And in between the kind of contributions that she made, we will discuss at length each of these writers, their unique contributions to women's fiction. Hannah More and Sarah More are the two sisters who also contributed. Fanny Burney, a very, very prominent figure of this romantic period. Maria Edgeworth, Susan Ferrier, Miss Mary Russell Mitford, Mrs. Anna Radcliffe, and Jane Austen. Jane Austen is the most popular among all these writers that we discussed right now. As we had already discussed about the various features of the romantic fiction, and particularly the fiction written by women writers, also you will find those kinds of elements that are found in the novels written by the male writers. Gothic novels is one of the major contributions of the Romantic period. A lot of men also wrote Gothic novels, and women also followed suit. The three prominent women writers who wrote Gothic novels, they include Anne Radcliffe, Reeve, and Mary Shelley. Coincidentally, there are two of these women writers who have their brothers in the same literary field. Sarah Fielding, whose brother Fielding contributed, and then you have this particular writer, Mary Shelley is a sister of P.B. Shelley, the most renowned romantic poet. We can see that Anne Radcliffe, Clara Reeve, and Mary Shelley, these three women writers contributed towards the Gothic novels. Now, what this Gothic novels stood for, and what are the kinds of works that were written by these women writers, and what were the real features of these writings, can be studied. Radcliffe's novel, which is The Mysteries of Udolpho and a Sicilian Romance. Clara Reeve, her imitation, it was an imitation of Horace Walpole, a famous Gothic novelist, in her famous novel The Old English Baron. And Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Frankenstein is quite popular because it has been adapted into films, and you can see that a lot of adaptations have been made of this particular 18th century fiction. Gothic writing dwelt upon the darker sides of human sensibility. So that is the main feature of these Gothic novels. You will also find that the uncontrollable passions, paranoia, the evil, addiction is set in large rolling grounds. The entire novel would be set in large rolling grounds. The castles with mysterious rooms would be the settings. You'll find dungeons, and then you'll find moving statues and lurking evil. There is an atmosphere of brooding menace and unseen dangers. These are the specialities of the Gothic novel. You will find the characters are very obsessed and unpredictable. Supernatural and irrational figure prominently. Taboo subjects like incest, blasphemy, and black magic became a routine element in these Gothic novels. You will also find sexuality, its multiple anxieties, desires, and prohibitions, which is very, very central to the Gothic tale. It often takes recourse. You will find that Mrs. Anne Ratcliffe, somebody who had published at least 5 romances, the title of her books include The Castles of Atheling and Dunbayne, a Sicilian Romance, The Romance of the Forest, The Mysteries of Udolpho, and The Italian. These are the 5 prominent romantic fiction written by Anne Radcliffe. She's quite popular and prominent writer of this particular period, that is the Romantic period. Mrs. Radcliffe, let us first of all look at the kind of features that you find in her kind of novels. You'll find that unlike most of the Gothic novels, the novels written by Mrs. Radcliffe had less artificial sources of fear. There is not that kind of atmosphere to create fear among the readers. You'll find that her main focus were the story and not the characters. So she did not very much delve into building characters, but her focus was primarily on the story. She tried to create a lot of variety in characters as well. You can find a lot of characters of all types in her work. Some of the heroines particularly of her novel, are either dark or fair. Now this is something very very specific about Mrs. Anne Radcliffe's novels, where her protagonists are either very dark or very fair. There are this kind of negative shades of the tyrants, the negative roles played by what you call as the antagonists of the novel. The tyrant always the same with different names. It's only that the qualities, the behavioral pattern and everything would be quite same. but then the tyrant would only carry a different name. That's it. Otherwise, you'll find all the antagonists of her novels quite similar. Her ability to describe places which she had never ever visited. I mean, that is something worth noting, because generally these days when writers, fiction writers, they travel, visit places, and they only write about the places that are familiar to them. But Mrs. Anne Radcliffe did not do that. What she did was, she was very clear about that she would write about the places, she described the places that she'd never ever visited. It was best in noting the changing aspects, that is what she did, noting the changing aspects of forest, castle, and sea. A lot of Gothic writers were inspired. She had inspired large number of Gothic writers. So as far as women novelists are concerned, it is Mrs. Anne Radcliffe who initiated into attempting this or experimenting with the Gothic novels. And you will find that she's inspired the other late writers who came into the field later on. Ratcliffe's characters were extremely passionate and gloomy. It is like the setting that she would create would be very, very brooding, menacing, or scary. The plots would be well crafted. So Mrs. Anne Radcliffe has contributed in a very, very major way to the romantic fiction writers, particularly the women fiction writers. The second most important name that comes to our mind is Maria Hedgeworth. Maria Hedgeworth was born in 1768 and she died in 1849. We find that what is her specialty? She's very different from, she did not attempt, the Gothic kind of novels. What she was